I've got a question for you, and I want you to just take 2 seconds and reflect on these descriptions and tell me if this is your world. Easygoing, slow, relaxing, peaceful, no stress. I have a feeling you're thinking, what podcast am I on right now? Well, you're on Ctrl+Alt+Delete with Lisa Duerre, and I bet none of that is true for you right now. The world we are in tech is complex and ever changing. And what we're going to talk about today is how leaders can truly show up with this ever changing complexity and still be successful. Because hoping for that Zen bubble bathy feeling with not a worry in the sky, this is not your reality and we know it. And Laura Davis, I'm so glad you're here to have this conversation today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. Tell me, are those descriptors something you're seeing in your client base right now?
No, not at all.
Not at all, right? I mean,
absolutely not.
People are talking about this new normal, and like, I think they think we're going to go back, but every time in my entire lifetime, when I look back, it's always gotten more complex, faster pressure, more uncertain. And so I think it's really time for us to just like lay out this reality for people that if you keep looking back and thinking it's going to be this pillow soft landing and, taking your naps, that we're missing out on the tremendous opportunity which this amount of chaos and change creates for leaders and their businesses.
Right. So, I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. And Lisa, I think it's such a human tendency to want to go back to the good old days, right?
Oh, right.
And they weren't so good, actually, in reality.
It's I'm really glad you said that, Laura, because part of me feels like, as a parent, right? My daughter's 10 now, and I look back to the first couple of months and I look at them as the good old days. But when I was in them, I was not sleeping. Nothing made sense. She's teething. I think she's sick. I can't find, a moment to myself. But now 10 years later, I'm like, man, those were good days. So I think even just on a personal level, we can all look for whatever that was. For some of us, it's college. It doesn't matter, right? But looking back, we kind of forget how hard it was. And I think the real opportunity is to lean in to see what can you take from that and bring it forward. Yeah,
absolutely. And Lisa, you're a self-reflective person. I'm not sure so many people do that. And I think it's a question, you and I are both in the learning business at the end of the day, of learning, but unlearning, because I know you're passionate about tech and burnout in tech, and we need to learn from the past 2 years and really see that this could be an inflection point for some very positive changes if we're willing to let go of how things have always been. Right?
All right. So everybody lean into that. Okay. Grab your coffee, grab a notepad, because I'm going to tell you why we want to hear from Laura today. I invited Laura because I've been really inspired by the work that she does and how she shows up in the world. But let me give you the formal intro. Since 1995, Laura has been coaching leaders at all levels of Fortune 500 and mid-sized companies to become more emotionally intelligent, agile, and aware of their role in creating a healthy, engaged corporate culture. Laura A. Davis is the CEO and founder of Laura A. Davis and Associates. I mean, is that the perfect description of what we're talking about today? Agile, intelligent, emotionally intelligent, aware of your role in creating the culture. So I think I'm going to go right in with the tough stuff, and then we're going to go there, and then we're going to
go for it.
Let's give them practical, tangible things we can do right now so we can take it out of the clouds. I should do my bump. Take it out of the clouds and like into their hearts, right? So one of the things I really want to ask you about from a corporate culture standpoint, I've been seeing and having so many conversations lately about, where we are now. Is it hybrid? Should we return to the office? Have we gone too far? And people are like starting to really join whatever camp they believe in. It should be all this way or all that way. And because you have such a passion and tremendous history in evolving cultures, right? I'd love to get your thoughts on this in general. Like, I have a belief in my heart that flexibility is required in this chaos and uncertainty. And yet there are leaders right now going, well, I can be flexible if you're in the office. But to me, that's not flexible.
Right. Well,
So I would just like to turn it over. What's your thoughts? What are you seeing?
Yeah.
How do you feel? Give it to me.
Yeah. So it's an evolving question that I don't think any company has really figured out yet. I think sometimes we miss the point, though. It's not so much about geography as it is about culture. And culture is a term that we bandy about. It just really means how things get done around here, really, at the end of the day.
Say it again. No, this is too important. I'm going to slow it down for everybody.
So culture, everybody talks about wanting a positive culture and a flexible culture and a leading edge culture, et cetera. But at the end of the day, culture is just really how things get done around here. And it's the values, the beliefs, the behaviors. And as you know, I'm passionate about leadership style. Too often we have that command and control kind of culture and leadership style, which what you were alluding to, you've got to be in the office and then we can be flexible, is not a very agile leadership style, because it is challenging for women. It's challenging for certain populations. What we need is to really take into account people's individual needs. And of course, they need to perform and do the duties of their job, but they don't have to be physically present to always do that, or always physically present to do that effectively, right?
I'm hearing you loud and clear. I have like so much coming to me when you're saying this. So
good.
We're not saying you can't ask people to be in the office. Of course, there's a time and a place for that. And what I'm hearing you say is agile and flexibility as far as the needs of the people doing the work. So I'll come clean on something, right?
Yeah.
I've had some back pain and it's been really hard to walk. And I recently realized that this is getting in my way of doing things. And there's a conference that I've been asked to attend. And it's the first time I've actually written in on the intake form, like, what are the mobility? I have limited mobility. What's the accessibility, right? And now I have to say, I'm embarrassed because I haven't thought of that sooner. And what I know is that our lived experience creates these opportunities. So I want to presence that. But if I had to hop in a car right now and commute, forget it. But I can sit right here and do amazing things, right? And so the conference conveners got on the phone and they're like, what are your needs? How can we help you? What can we do to support you? And part of me is like, I don't even think I have the energy to do the flight, much less sit there where everyone's jumping up and going around and hiking in nature and doing. I'm like, right now, I need to take my Advil and ice my back. Do you know, like the basics? And so I'm thinking about how many people, because I know back pain is huge.
Sure.
I mean, it's very prevalent. Huge is probably the wrong word. It's very prevalent. So how many people are suffering in back pain and not talking about it with their boss? And their boss is like, come on in, you got to be here. And then they're like, well, I don't want to talk about this. If I could just ice my back, I'd be okay. I mean, I have clients that they work laying down sometimes when the back pain gets bad. So I feel like this opens up such a conversation about really the flexibility that's needed for even the unseen. Forget the seen. How about all the unseen too?
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant point. And I have a funny story because I've been doing some work with a large Fortune 500 company. I'm very fortunate I'm working with a progressive leader who is all about people and all about creating a positive culture where people are really valued and heard, and we're leveraging everyone's talent. And the other half of the organization is run by someone who's more old school. And during the whole pandemic, this particular company was pretty much in the office for a variety of reasons. They're all in one location, but they walked through the office, these two leaders, and the one said, where is everybody? And so the other person said, well, they're home working. This person just couldn't kind of grok that. And so I think it relates to a fundamental understanding of the importance of trust, because to me, I think the reason why people want everyone in the office is because they don't necessarily trust them to be working at home. And I think we've proved in the pandemic that people can be very productive and effective at home. I do think, however, Lisa, and work that we both do relates to teamwork and team development, that we need to be very intentional when we're working in a hybrid or remote kind of environment to make sure we replicate or we work out some kind of method to be human at work and to have the equivalent of the coffee conversations, coffee break conversations, or the water cooler conversations, because that is so important, that human connection element that is often missing. And as you know, I'm a big believer in assessments. I know you use Clifton Strengths. We use Everything Disc, the original Everything Disc. And I like to say that that can be a tool. It's basically an operating system for a culture, but it's also like your human decoder ring. And
Totally.
different styles have different needs. And while some styles really love to work remotely and not talk to anyone and do their work and then perhaps confer, other people, like I would imagine you're like this, I know I am, I literally can't think or come up with a new program unless I'm collaborating and talking it through with someone.
Yeah, well, this is why you and I get along, because
Yes,
it's like, this is why you go to mastermind groups, or you figure out ways to get that need met, especially if you own your own company, right?
exactly.
I really want to reinforce what you're saying, because I think this lens is so important. So you use DISC, which I know I've done my DISC, and I'm sure we can giggle about who I am.
Yes,
My preferences.
I know your style.
Yeah. So Clifton Strengths is something we use. We also do
Yes.
Colby. And I can tell you, every engagement starts with that. And what happens with the leaders when they actually learn about themselves, they can see where this conflict is and why they might not show up in the way they even want to. And it's fascinating to watch it's almost like the guard goes down.
Yes.
It's safer to kind of be yourself and go, oh, I'm wired this way. So in Colby land, I'm a quick start. I'm a long line. My quick start is off the charts, right?
Are you a 10 quick start?
I'm a 9.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So am I, actually.
Well, this is, again, you can find your people, right? My husband's a long line fact finder. He's also an engineer. It's not lost on me, the gift that he brings to our relationship and the frustration I give him when I brainstorm with him. I need to come with him with a buttoned up idea, and then we need to do something, whether it's spring break plans or whatever, meal plan, right?
So in DISC land, he's probably a high C, which is conscientiousness. And he probably has a fair amount of steadiness also.
Absolutely.
And similar to you, when we start an engagement, we always use the DISC assessment. And it's very validating for people to see, this is what I'm motivated by. This is what I'm stressed by.
Yeah.
And this is what you're motivated by, which I'm trying to motivate you the way I like to be motivated, and it doesn't work.
Well, I think it goes back to what you said about trust. So when we think about these leaders, so shareholders, right? C-suite peeps, we're talking to you right now. If you don't know your wiring, your internal operating system, the invitation for you is to figure it out, whether you work with Laura, us, whoever. Like, we're not here to say, come work with us. We're here to say, go know yourself. Right? If you want to work with us, of course, we'd love to, but know yourself, because when you don't have that blind spot anymore, you can actually be more creative with the environment that you're leading or the policies that you're setting. I think, Laura, what you're talking about, trust, when you have self-awareness, it's much easier to trust others because you can understand how people are wired.
Totally. I mean, I know you're a big proponent of this too. It's so important to have psychological safety and trust and transparency in a work environment. And this really allows people to be more open and vulnerable. But, in my experience, I'm sure this is true with the people that you work with. People are trustworthy. They think they are trusted by people, but they're not necessarily. And it's often because they don't understand that there are elements of trust, behavioral elements of trust. And the elements are acceptance, openness, straightforwardness, and reliability. And this comes from my colleague, Keith Ayres in Australia. They've done a lot of research.
Okay, we're going to pause. I want to pause for a second. Acceptance?
Please. Acceptance.
Because I want everyone grab your pen. Okay. Acceptance. Openness.
Openness,
straightforwardness, and I missed the fourth one.
And reliability.
Reliability. Okay.
Right.
So if we think about this, I want to go here because this is practical, tangible, actionable. So pause this if you need to, but grab your pen. Get your paper, because what we're talking about right now are the 4 components of trust. Am I getting this right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Components, behavioral components.
Behavioral components of trust, which of course you can say, I trust you, but do I really trust you? Heck, isn't this true even in our personal relationships, right? Okay,
Totally.
I want to make sure the person you wanted to give credit to, their name gets all the way here. So let's give credit.
Keith Ayers, and it's Integral Leadership Institute.
Keith Ayers, Integral Leadership Institute. Okay,
Out
Laura,
of Sydney, Australia.
I want to hear those 4 things. This is where I want to go. Let's go.
Yeah, no, I think this is fascinating. And I just did this with the team last week, and the light bulbs went off, because most of us think of trustworthiness as something that is or isn't, like, and it's
like an on or off
reliability or not. Like, I do what I say I'm going to do. That's one element of it, absolutely. But there's other pieces of the puzzle, and the acceptance is probably the least prevalent at the senior level. And I'll tell you what I mean by that.
Oh, I'm rolling up my sleeves now.
Yeah. So as you know, a lot of times you progress in an organization because you are a doer, and Disc gets a high D, and Colby, it's often, somebody who has that drive or a quick start many times. And sometimes, if that's the environment, people don't really feel safe to speak up and offer a dissenting opinion, because the dominant culture is so, this is the way it is. They might be open to someone sharing their opinion, but if they don't openly invite that, the other styles will be less comfortable doing that. They'll feel like they're being rude and interrupting. And really, many times there's a real disconnect between people who are drivers like that and people who are more like your husband, steady and calm and patient, good listeners. So they may misunderstand one another. And the Ds tend to think that the people who are not quick on their feet are slow, or don't have an opinion, or don't care. And nothing could be further from the truth. Sometimes they're just waiting for a moment to get
they're waiting for you to pause. I have to say, I really want to land this through the lens of tech. Always on, never good enough, will replace you tomorrow. Okay. So imagine, now this isn't your company, listener. It's somebody else's, I'm sure.
You have
always on, never good enough, will replace you tomorrow, with this high driver, quick start, action-oriented leadership style. Imagine the stress, uncertainty, and chaos that's running through the operating system of everyone else that isn't wired like you. Yeah. Because they're worried they're going to get on that layoff list. They're worried they're going to get their ass chewed. They're worried they're going to disappoint you, right? And leaders are getting promoted in tech because of this characteristic, as well as their technical brilliance. So you take someone who's always recognized and rewarded for their amazing, knowledge, expertise in this style. So yeah, how can there be trust? Like, Laura, how do you build the trust?
Yeah, no, it's great. And in fact, I think it was last October, I worked with a fintech company you would know. Their senior leadership team was comprised of all Ds, one S, no Cs, which shocked me in a tech organization where you need that rigor and precision and accuracy and level of detail orientation. It was sort of interesting. So one, you mentioned it before, Lisa, is awareness. Leaders go get self-aware, understand the impact that your behavior is having on other people and how you need to adapt it. And I will often use language as a metaphor. I have a sister who married an Austrian, and he's passed now, bless his heart, but he was a bit older than she, and she's older than I am. So back in the day when my parents were still living and I was still traveling with them, we would go visit, and my mother would order at a local guest house in English, right? My mother had traveled all over the world, but didn't understand that not everyone spoke English. So what does she do when she's ordering and people don't understand her? She speaks more loudly,
louder,
more slowly. and
Yep.
This is what happens in organizations, right? If their style is high D, their tendency is to become more urgent or more dominant or more get it done yesterday, and leave people in the dust then. So what I coach teams and leaders to do is to speak in the other person's language. You don't have to change who you are because you're bringing value to the table, but you need to know enough, in this example, German, to be able to connect and gain the trust of the other person. And once you learn to speak a little bit of that language, then the other person feels safer to bring what they have to the table. And that's so important because they're missing out on valuable insight and knowledge and ideas because they are not really listening.
I really appreciate your example so much because it takes it out of the work environment to just recognize, I remember going to Mexico and ordering a tequila sonrisa, and the guy gave me a shot of tequila and he smiled at me. And I'm like, I don't think I said that right. I wanted a sunrise, but I think I said tequila with a smile. Right. And he was like, and I remember that going, boy, I got a lot to learn. Right. But language, these examples, I think, are really important. And I know we're throwing letters around because we know DISC and maybe the listeners.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. We're going to go there. But I think before we even tell you what D's and C's and I's, I think the most important thing you said a lot of important things. What I want to take away and pull through as we then describe the four. Being curious and recognizing that not everyone is wired like you. Like, it's just the invitation to be curious. What I learned on my leadership journey was that because I'm an extroverted thinker who gets energized by being in groups. So I would, as the leader, come up with 17 things we could do next week that were awesome ideas. And my entire team thought they were all action items. And they would run off and do them all and then come back with all these. And I'm like, in my head, what is going on? And so I sat one of my trusted colleagues down, and she's like, when you talk, we listen. Like, you're the boss. You say, hey, we should have, a marketing campaign for this next product by, for these reasons, we're going to go build you a marketing campaign. I'm like, I got to be really careful when I talk. And so what we really figured out, even just extroversion, introversion, that what I needed to say was, I'm just ideating. One of my top strengths on StrengthsFinder is ideation. It energizes me. But, just like my husband, when I ideate too much, I can feel his energy. He's just like, oh, but he doesn't want to be rude. Yeah. He doesn't want to be rude, but it's literally causing him pain. When you look at the brain scans, right? When some of the neuroscience we know. So what I just wanted to land with what you were saying with the German example and my Spanish example from my college days was that being curious as a leader and inviting all voices in. So back to your point of psychological safety, if there's someone on your team that doesn't speak up, but has great ideas, you're going to have to offline talk with them and say, I'd like you to bring your ideas to the meeting. Here's what's on my mind. Right. And then that person needs to feel comfortable enough to not have it perfect. Because how many times do you come up with an idea and it just gets shot down? So it's the invitation in itself and how you handle it. So if I can pause, can you define DISC? Because I know we're talking in that language and I want people to understand the four. I'm going to let you do you.
Sure. Well, there are four primary styles. And what I like about the original Wiley disc is it's the most valid and reliable because there are disc knockoffs. There was a split copyright in the 60s. I think also that Wiley has done the most rigorous job of keeping the statistical validity and reliability up to date and in tune with the digital world, which is excellent. But at a high level, you can be a primary and secondary style. It also matters how strong your inclination is, and then the combination, which gives you a deeper, richer experience and understanding of your style. Of course, you're more than just your disc style, but it relates to how you're motivating people, how you're stressed, what kind of environment you use to develop people, how you delegate, etc. So D stands for dominance, and that is often someone who's very results oriented, achievement oriented, direct, get it done yesterday. The Nike slogan, just do it, would be a D slogan. And then influence is what you and I are, and you and I are probably some ID combinations.
I got some D in me.
Yeah, right. I mean, I do too. I have an extra priority in the D land.
Yeah.
But influence really means just what you were saying, the person who likes to brainstorm, who likes to think on their feet, who often is very friendly and outgoing and energizing in their leadership style. And then we move to I call it the South Pole, but to the steadiness dimension. And someone who's high in steadiness is a good listener, sort of your steady Eddie, just a calming influence on the team. And as we were talking about earlier, there's sometimes the ones who can't get a word in edgewise if there's a lot of dominance and action-oriented people on a team. And then last but not least is the conscientiousness or C style. And the C style, I would suspect your husband's a combination of C and S.
Yep,
is
totally.
That person who's precise, accurate, very reserved generally until you get to know them, a little bit more formal, perhaps in the work environment. And, you can be a combination of these nuanced styles, which also gives some depth to the whole process. Yeah.
So I appreciate you going over this. And the reason I want to bring it up is because we've got 4 styles and we're talking about trust in the workplace.
Yes.
So whether or not you use DISC or Colby or MBTI, I mean, we can listen, Laura and I can rattle off every assessment on the planet. That's not the point.
Certifiable.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. The point is to know through the lens in which you operate, and then to remind yourself, how might you invite the other styles into the conversation, into the relationship, into the decision-making. So when we go back to the 4 things you talked about, acceptance, openness, straightforwardness and reliability.
Yes.
All of that, a D might show up, someone with D tendencies would show up differently than a C.
Exactly.
Okay. So let's go through so we went through acceptance. Now let's go to openness. And maybe I've already gotten this there because we were just talking about the different styles. But
no, this is great.
More.
So this is a great example that you will be able to relate to personally, I think, and especially in the tech world, you have a lot of engineers or developers, software developers, people who prefer to detach and work alone. And so that tends to be a D or C style. So openness tends to be a high I, that's you and me, strength. So what's fascinating is whichever component or behavioral element you're strong at, it tends to be how you assess or judge people, whether they're trustworthy or not. So I'll give you an example. I'll use myself as an example. And I know this stuff, right? I've studied it for 25 years. But if someone isn't open with me, and openness means they share their thoughts. They don't have to overshare, but I know what's going on with them. Like they're not hard to read. And they're also receptive to someone else's ideas, then I trust them. I think they're wonderful. That said, someone who is high in conscientiousness, the C again, tends to be more reserved and tends to be the sort of person that the last thing that they would do is overshare. If you ask them and you give them time to think, as you were mentioning earlier, and give them some time to prepare, then you're going to get a great answer. But on the fly, you might not. And then sometimes there's that misunderstanding that I might think, well, they're not very forthcoming. There's something going on. And there may be nothing going on. I'm making an assumption, making up a story that has nothing to do with reality. And similarly, because I tend to be effusive or enthusiastic and think on my feet, the C person might perceive me as a little flighty and perhaps not as reliable or as prepared or well thought out, and misjudge me as well. So it's really helpful to understand my lens, my strength tends to be how I judge somebody else. And I may not see the other gifts that they bring to the table, which causes challenges.
Yeah, I really appreciate this so much. So to anyone listening right now, let me just talk to you, listener. The question for yourself is, where do you find yourself judging someone based on their style, right? And what's the opportunity to be more curious about that? This comes up a lot in my work in the strengths land with Clifton Strengths. There's woo, winning others over.
Yes.
And then there's relator. So woo, winning other over, lives in the influence world. Relator lives in the relationship world, right? They're both how you interact with people. Winning others over is me. I can walk in a room and talk to everybody, and I'm going to spend 5 minutes with each because inside myself, I don't want to miss out on one person.
Right.
The relator might go to the same room, meet one person and stay the whole time because they're fascinating and they're connecting.
Yeah.
And a lot of times from an introvert standpoint, when you get your energy differently than an extrovert, I believe people see the relators as really hard to get to know and cliquey. But the relators see the woo strength as like shallow and flighty. And both of them have a benefit to your organization, right? So you might make sure the woo person logs on early to your meeting and greets everybody. And then the relator might do the follow-up on something that was really brilliantly said that you want to just relate back to someone, right? So there's different ways to look at it. But when it comes to openness, being aware of almost like what gets under your skin or what you don't trust, and then get curious about that is what I'm hearing you say.
Beautifully stated.
Yeah.
Yes. And not to jump up the ladder so quickly of inference, not to make assumptions and draw conclusions, but it happens so fast.
It's so fast. It's automatic.
So fast. Yeah. So we have to really, as you say, be curious, question our assumptions and say, maybe that person is just being thoughtful, or they would like to go back and prepare. Or,
how might you hold them in high regard and look at that through the lens of it? One of the things my therapist told me, I think in my 30s, was like, what story are you telling yourself, and is it true? Right. And I was like, what does that mean? I'm always right. She's like, oh, hell no, are you right? Right. Your storytelling is so wired from birth that you make inferences all the time. So I think as leaders, we have an obligation to pause and to be curious.
Well,
so I love
Oprah
this.
says, what do you know for sure? Or what
do you know for sure is that you don't know nothing, right?
Yeah.
Or you know that you can tell stories really quickly, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. So can we go to
please
your next one? Fabulous S. So we've done acceptance and we've done openness.
Yeah, straightforwardness. So
straightforwardness.
The D's tend to be very straightforward, right? I call it like I see it. And the steadiness tends to want to be a little more diplomatic and a little bit more thoughtful. And so one example of how this shows up in the workplace could be on a team deciding who's going to play what role. I'm thinking of a situation years ago where I coached a privacy attorney at Walmart, actually, and he had great ideas and they wanted to promote him, but he wouldn't speak up. Now, he was on a team with other men, all men at the time, surprise, surprise. And in fact, most of the colleagues that he worked with had a very strong D or a very strong I style. And they were also from Latin America. So there's a certain cultural component that comes into play too. And a lot of times my client would have good ideas, but he would, like you, I think, alluded to before, he wanted to be 100% sure that he knew the facts before he spoke up. And then he had difficulty interrupting the passionate talkers in the room.
Yeah.
And this is worse in a hybrid environment. We started kind of on that theme, worse on a Zoom call or Teams call or whatever it is. So one of the things I helped him with is, you need to jump in because, again, it's about perception. And you could say something like, right now I'm 90% sure. I will check on my facts and I'll get back to you in a couple of days or tomorrow or later this week, so that people with that straightforwardness bias, if you will, get that you're like, taking action and you're responding. But again, you're not committing, you're trying to meet your needs too here for accuracy.
I love this so much. This
practical,
is
very practical.
So good, so practical. So anyone who is feeling that they can't get their voice in and that they're waiting because they want to have the answer, especially in tech, right? I got to have the right answer because everything I am my expertise. What I've been telling my clients in that space, and I have a couple of examples too, it's very similar to what you're saying and the nuance I say. And I think it's good to have both so people can pick what
Oh,
feels
I want to
good.
hear what you say.
Yeah, so I
I'm
say things
always
like,
learning from you, Lisa.
without
Always.
all the data, here's what my gut says. Or,
Good.
if I had to decide right now, I would be leaning here.
Okay.
Might I have till tomorrow to, check a couple of data points? Like doing something that makes it safe to be imperfect in the moment, but then having that ability to close it with a timeline. Right. And then, so one of the things that
Perfect.
I have a couple of leaders the same way. How do I get my voice out? The C-suite wants me to talk, but they won't shut up. I'm just going to speak for myself. Right. And I'll say things like, are you involved in the agenda? Can you get yourself up there first before they start going? Is there ways for you to infuse yourself, or find someone on the team that you can text and say, I have a point. Can you help me? Right. Like invite me in. So like really strategically managing that, so that your voice can be heard, because don't we all know, I'm guilty of it too.
Yeah,
So
no, that's brilliant, Lisa. I love that language, and I'm going to use that myself.
I love yours
And
too. I love yours
yeah,
too.
I think that sometimes people who are very technical, and I'm sure you see this a lot. Of course, I have some clients in the tech space as well. Some don't recognize the importance of that
Yes.
strategically thinking through how you're being perceived, and just the whole idea of the importance of social and emotional skills in general. Too
Totally.
much emphasis on the technical, not enough on the people skills.
Yeah.
And building trust is one component, but if you don't have that trust and people aren't feeling safe to speak up, then you're going to find out about the problems too late to do anything about
Yeah.
them.
I always say leadership is lonely, and it's up to you to make it not lonely, right? And the way to make it not lonely is to be curious and to build relationships.
Absolutely.
So there's something else you said about straightforwardness. I'd like to presence.
Please.
When I think of straightforwardness, I think of a Brene Brown quote. It says, "Clear is kind." And I think about, MBOs and KPIs and OKRs and SOPs, and I could make a song out of this. It's one thing to like put it up on the big, right? It's one thing to put it up on the big board and be like, here's where we're all going. But then underneath it all, nobody aims there, and they go do their own thing all the time, and no one's bringing them back. So I think straightforwardness from a trust standpoint is critical, because if you tell people we're going here, but then you don't hold accountable, and you're not bringing straightforward information back on, here's the stats on where we are, who's going to trust you anyway?
Absolutely. Well, absolutely. It's very demotivating for the people who are following through on their commitments.
Yeah.
And you're touching on the importance of feedback, and people are abysmal at giving feedback. And I call it reinforcing and developmental feedback, not constructive criticism. And developmental feedback is to grow and to get better. And what people fail to do is connect the dots around why a behavioral change is important and what the impact will be. And I think too often we just, say, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. Well, why is it important to do something different?
Yeah. And then to tie it back to how they're wired, their operating system, right? All right. So let's go to reliability, because I think this is a really good segue.
Yes. Okay. So again, it's the flip side of the openness and the high I having that as their strength. Often the limitation of someone with the strong influence style is that, just as we have been talking about, we want to get involved in everything, and we might overcommit because everything seems exciting and interesting, and I want to do it all. And I know throughout my career, especially managing the businesses, you can't do it all. You need to rely on your team. You need to learn when to say no and when to delegate and so forth. So sometimes the I's take on too much, overcommit, and then the C's would see that as, flighty or not serious, or they can't be counted on. I'm done with you, right? Now, I do want to say this is not, set in stone. Again, awareness is the key. If you're aware that you tend to overcommit, then you take steps to not do that. But most people have all of this going on unconsciously and don't know why people don't trust one another.
Yeah. And they're in back-to-back meetings all day and thinking about it late at night, and then they can't sleep, and they're like, why do I have insomnia? You know what I mean? Like all this ties together. So one of the biggest gifts I think we can give people today is remember there's these 4 components So if we circle back, because we've covered a lot here, Laura, this
We
is
have. It's
so
been fun.
awesome. So we started
Good.
with hybrid versus return to work. Chaos is not going away. It's going to get more and more complex. But what you can pull through, no matter what day you're having, are these 4 components of trust: acceptance, openness, straightforwardness, and reliability. And then gauge yourself, do your own self-assessment. How do I think I'm showing up? And then here's your double dog dare. Ask somebody else who doesn't operate like you. Hey, how am I showing up here? Right? The biggest gifts I always got were people not in the same zone as me in strengths or style and giving me feedback. That's how I learned I was killing everybody with all these action items that weren't real. And then they'd be like, I don't even trust her to talk. Like, I don't want to go to meetings because blah, blah, blah. Right. Like, oh, everybody, I just need 5 minutes to ideate. Then we're all going to vote on one. You know, and the other one I also learned was they would say, is there an action item in here? But that took courage. And I'd be like, oh no, thanks for, thanks for the energy burst. I'm on my way. So languaging, right? And having the permission to ask and clarify. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh.
And taking personal responsibility too, I think is critical. If I know I have that tendency to want to ideate or dominate or frankly talk too much, then I have to be attentive to who hasn't spoken up and invite that voice into the conversation. And as we know, most people, to your point, are going back to back and they don't even realize that some people haven't been participating. And so having that meta cognition, that meta awareness is really important. I like to say it's the soup in which it all swims, really,
I love that.
Yeah, just the feeling in the room. Are people all engaged and listening and participating? And it's sort of like a dance.
Yeah. One of the things you and I, when we were prepping and checking our lighting and our tech, you had said was it's intentional. And I think that that's a great way to remind people that this isn't something you think about. It's not an afterthought. You have to be intentional as a leader to be conscious of these 4 areas, know that people are wired differently, and figure out how to bring out the best. Like your obligation, honestly, the gift you have in leading people, I consider it a moral obligation. If you say yes to people leadership, I'm going to call it your moral obligation. I also think it's a tremendous gift to the planet to actually have every voice in that room and in those Zoom rooms, right? And being intentional with your design. Yeah. So I want to ask you 2 questions because I feel like we could do this all day.
We could talk for all.
I don't want to oversaturate with 2 of us ideating all over the place. So I think it's a really good landing here because we've given them, we've given ourselves an opportunity to connect on these topics that they're passionate about. And we've given the listener a lot of things to reflect on. So if you were to give the listener one question with everything we've said, like, is there a generative question that they might jot down right now to kind of reflect back on all the different topics we have? If you were coaching the listener right now after this beautiful conversation, what would the reflective question be?
Can I change that a little bit and give you a quote? So one of my favorite quotes is from Eric Hoffer. And people might not be familiar with him because he was a longshoreman. So they called him the longshoreman philosopher. And I was looking him up recently because he wrote a book called The True Believer, which was about mass change. And of course, we have mass change and mass movements going on. So I was just curious about that. And the quote is, in times of great change and disruption, the learners will inherit the earth. And the learned will find themselves beautifully equipped for a world that no longer exists. I know, mic drop.
There goes. What? Say it again.
Yeah. So in times of great change and disruption, the learners will inherit the earth, and the learned, meaning the old guard, the old paradigm, the
ones who already know it all, right? Not curious. Yep.
Will find themselves beautifully equipped for a world that no longer exists.
Oh my God, it's so good.
That's where we are now. That's the inflection point.
That's where we are. Exactly. Oh man, I'm glad I asked this question of you. Thank you for this quote.
You're so welcome.
So here's where we're going to go as people reflecting, thinking about, am I the learner or the learned? Is there a song that comes to mind we can add to our playlist that either energizes you when you're reflecting, inspires you as you're contemplating, or perhaps even just helps you take that deep breath of pause so that you can reflect? What's your go-to song?
Oh, there's so many good songs. Well, we're part of one community, well, we're part of several communities together. And I love Jason Mraz's song, Look for the Good,
Look for the
because I think
good.
it's
Yep.
very tempting these days with so much change and disruption. And it certainly appears that the world is going to hell in a handbasket. I mean, we just get through or are slowly getting on the other side of the coronavirus, and now we have the Ukraine and all of that. And I was trying to think about, okay, what's going to be good about this? And I went back and I was looking at something about uh, Frances, I think you pronounce her name, Hesselbein. She was the CEO of the Girl Scouts, and she had some great thoughts about how, you just have to keep looking for the good and what we're learning from things and keep that perspective. And that really keeps us focused on what we need to do next instead of where we began, like, oh, let's long for the good old days. That does us no good. Those good old days are never coming back, and they weren't that good in the first place. So,
what's so interesting about that song, because I know this song really well, and I think there's so many layers to this, that it's like, look for the good in yourself. Don't get lost in that. Like, look for the good in the team, look for the good in your neighbors, look for the good, you can extrapolate it all the way to the world. And it's not to, I don't believe this song is intended to like spiritually bypass the shit and horror that's going on.
Or pour
But it is to
paint
say,
on something, right?
right.
Exactly.
But it is to say, look for it anyway, because that's how you get through it. Look for it anyway, because that's how we rise. That's how we solve problems. And it's not lost on me that this song also, for leaders, when they're thinking about everybody must be back in the office, why don't you go look for the good of when you did have to go remote with no notice? Look for the good of what was possible, what did come alive, what's changed, what innovations have created. So look for the good before you just be like, it has to be like this.
It can be a both and, for heaven's sakes.
I love it. Yeah.
Totally.
So I want to make sure everybody knows that you have a wonderful resource on your website, and we're going to put it in the show notes, because it's basically a guide, if you will, to get to get through this chaos and uncertainty. And I've read it and I love it. So we have to get it out to the world. But if people want to get to you, because we'll link that in the show notes, but do you prefer LinkedIn connections? Do you want people to go to your website? How should people reach out if they want to?
Great question. And thank you for that. I appreciate the feedback. They can get the companion guide that you're referencing on the website. It's lauraadavis.com. Someone got Laura Davis before I did in 95.
LauraADavis.com is beautiful. Like A+.
Easy peasy.
That's what I'm saying. Laura A+ Davis. Okay.
There you go. And then similarly, if you want to link in with us, we'd love that. We post a lot of leadership, team development, culture change kind of resources on LinkedIn, and it's Laura A. Davis. Yeah.
Laura A. Davis. What a gift you are. Thank you for your time. Oh,
it's been my honor and privilege, and it's been fun, and we could talk all day.
We could. But now here's what I'm going to say for as we close this out. So Ctrl+Alt+Delete is really rebooting Leadership Drive. It's rebooting your operating system, your mindset, your beliefs. It's looking at how you can navigate the chaos and uncertainty. And what a gift you gave through the lens of rebooting, through the different ways of how people are wired, the different ways in decision making is made, where people can get stuck, and how to build that trust. That is the reboot. And if we don't want the great resignation, and we do want, engaged, high-performing teams, rebooting ourselves and being self-aware first, I believe, is the first step. And I'm just so grateful for everything you gave.
Perfectly stated.
Thank
you so much. This was fun. Thanks again.
All right, everybody, make it a great day. And don't forget, look for the good. Write down a couple of things: acceptance, openness, straightforwardness, and reliability. Where are you landing there? Assess yourself and go ask someone. You've done a lot. All right, take good care, everyone.
Bye now.